Hi, my name is Tyler Mowry, and welcome to the Writer's Mind Podcast, episode 65. All right, welcome to another episode of the Writer's Mind Podcast. If you want to listen to episode 66 and all of the other even episodes, then you can find them on the Patreon, patreon.com/thewritersmind. So today is actually the first day I've started this writing challenge. You actually probably won't see the video by the time this is out, so it'll still be being edited. Essentially, I'm working on writing 10 pages a day. I'm trying to get a feature done in a week for the channel. And one of the things that I have realized as I've been working on the outline of this new screenplay is that the things just get so much faster, and you're able to break story so much better and so much quicker when you have just written a lot and you really work on figuring out, okay, how do I apply, how do I figure out what's not working in my story, and then how do I take the things that I know and actually apply them. Once you really have spent a lot of work bridging that gap, and the way that you bridge the gap between your writing and the fundamentals is writing a lot and very specifically going through and seeing what is and isn't working. What you find out is that things get so much faster for you. So I got some on the mic, fuzz on the mic. With this story that I'm outlining, it's just so, I'm trying to do it quick, of course, because the whole idea of the video is that this is done in a week, but I'm really I don't feel like I'm rushing. Like, where I am now with it, I'm just like, okay, this is pretty much where things should be. I think things are kind of moving forward. I've already had to make a couple adjustments, and that's actually not going to work, or, I think that because of how I write, I should do this instead. And I'm just able to move so quick because I feel like I've put so many reps in, and not only that, but I've read and tried to fix so many other writer screenplays and try to help them identify what isn't working in their story, that I'm really able to move through it pretty fast. And one of the things that I think that a lot of people get caught up in is this idea that not just for storytelling, but even in general, it's like, just because you put a lot of time into something doesn't mean that is the best way to do it. Or just because you put time into a project, it doesn't mean that more time equals it's getting better. Naval Ravikant says this in the most succinct way. He says, time spent has nothing to do with job done. So you could spend 10 minutes on your outline and have so much and have made so much progress, or you can spend a year on your outline and have gotten nowhere, specifically because of not just how you're doing the work, or not just because you're doing work, but how you are actually implementing the things that you have learned by writing and trying to apply fundamentals of storytelling to your writing and trying to find the gaps in your writing in comparison to these fundamentals. The more that you do that, the more you can spend less time on some of these earlier phases of your story and just get to writing. And not only that, you can spend less time rewriting. You can cut your rewrites down from 8 drafts to 2 or 3, the more that you have a grasp on that. And what I'm saying comes right down to just, again, what is the core of my YouTube channel and the reason I continue to make these videos. And the one main lesson I'm trying to give people, which is that you learn by doing, right? We got caught up in this idea when we started going to school, and then we moved from preschool into elementary school, and then we moved from elementary school to middle school to high school to college to a graduate degree and getting a master's. And it's like we are so used to learning and then trying to do something, but that is just not how you actually learn. You don't learn then do, you do then learn. You must start and then learn after you start. You must write bad screenplays and then learn what's not working. That is the core of the problem with our education system and why so many bad scripts are written, and why you get stuck on page 20 of your script and run back to ideas and YouTube videos and books about screenwriting rather than just pushing forward on your script. The idea is that you take the real, actual knowledge, what I mean by is like the applied knowledge, right? The integrated understanding, not just reading something from a book or watching a YouTube video and hearing somebody talk about a concept, but applied knowledge, right? The idea that you have taken some piece of information, tried to apply it yourself, failed, and failed again, and then failed again, and then failed again, and then you finally grasped the spirit of this piece of language that was given to you. You grasped the real purpose behind it, or the energy behind it, or what was really being said. You grasp the meaning, and then you have actually learned. But you didn't grasp that meaning until you tried to apply just the words of it, and then failed, and apply it and failed, and failed. And then you realize, oh, for me, this is how it is supposed to operate. This is just like what I've said with screenwriting books, that as I have deepened my understanding of writing, and as I have shared with other people on my YouTube channel and in my course, concepts that I've learned and ideas that have really helped me, I go back and I look at something that like Robert McKee said, and I go, that's what he meant. We got to the same conclusion, but I read his book. I didn't fully understand what he was saying. I went and applied. I put it in my own words. I applied, and then I realized, oh, wow, this is what Robert McKee was saying when he said meaning produces emotion. What was he saying? He was saying your story needs this dilemma, this philosophical, ethical, moral dilemma. That moral dilemma is what creates the meat and the skeleton of your story, not simply a concept or just characters who want to go get the job. It's this deeper level. It's the meaning level. That's what creates the story. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's obviously what he's saying, but you're just blinded when you're just reading words, right? It's so easy to miss things when it's just words. You must go through the process of application, because through that application you find the meaning. And so for me, what I have really tried to do is do that application and find the meaning, and I found that things start to really snap and snap and snap and snap and snap and integrate and integrate and integrate. And I find patterns that I can use to break new stories. Okay, so, something like the story circle, or just ways that I write even. Like you'll see in the video that comes out that I'm making an adjustment kind of early on just because of how I am going through the outline phase. And I'm just sort of thinking, from my previous understanding of how my writing is gone, this is probably a little too short, so I'm just going to add this, right? But if I hadn't written and known how I write, I wouldn't have known to start making some of these edits or making some of these shifts until I was in the draft and then getting frustrated because I was on page 25 and I hadn't thought about something, and here we are. And so that is, what I want the core of, that's what I want you to be able to take. The core message is that, like, you start, then you learn. And as long as you just keep pushing and you keep running, you'll start to realize how things actually work, and you'll start to really integrate it into how you view story and how you view the world, and you'll be able to put it in your own words. And those words will be a little bit different from mine. And I'm sure that, like, if you're somebody who has followed my content, you will use some of the same words that I use, but just because we're using the same words, you have to really grasp the meaning of that and define them yourselves, and then you find that through the application. And so I think that a lot of times, this definitely was me in the very beginning, where like a script is just this mountain, right? Like, oh my gosh, you have to do so much. Like, you got to figure out an outline just for you to get 10 pages in and it break. You have to write and write and write and write and get to 100 pages of this story just to, as I've told you a million times, just to do it all again, most likely, because you totally were off base, and it just becomes this mountain, right? And you're like, how can I ever actually tell good stories? All I wanted to do was just tell a good story. Why is this such a mess now? But then you push through it and you get frustrated, and in that frustration, you say, you know what? Fine, I will go try to find the answers. Fine, I will take an objective look at what my mistakes are. Fine, I'm so frustrated that now, because I'm so annoyed and I'm so frustrated, I'm finally in a mental headspace where I can grow, because my ego is finally out of the way, and I can just be objective about, this is bad, somebody needs to help me. And that's what we are bad at getting to, because we want to believe that we're just great at things immediately. And nobody, myself included, likes, being told that they're bad at something, especially when they put so much work into it. But there's no other way you grow. And the positive of these lows that you can have, and these feelings of just nothing is working, is that is where you're growing, right? You're not growing as much when things are working. Now, the flip side, once you get out of that valley, and there's a lot of those and they don't end, so, just kind of as they come, allow them to come, you have upswings and you realize, like, wow, I'm making progress here. Wow, I can go through some of these pieces so much faster. Wow, I have such a much better intimate knowledge of not only these fundamentals of writing, but my writing problems and my writing style, and where I get caught up, and where I can lean on myself to figure it out in the moment. That's the thing too, is there are points, even when I outline now, where I don't always have to outline so heavily on this part or this part. Like, I don't go scene by scene. I do the general gist. And sometimes, like, if I'm like, oh, this will be a good scene, I'll like write little notes here and there. But ultimately, I don't do that, because I know I can work my way through it. I know I can do that. I know that once I'm in the zone of that, I can kind of go scene to scene to scene. And once I have the pieces, I can roll. So that's a part of me figuring out my process, and then using that to my advantage so that I can move faster. And not just move faster to move faster, although sometimes that is good, moving faster in a more accurate way, in a way where I know I'm on the right track. And that's such a big feeling, is like knowing that the story is in your control is so important, because so many writers, they get to the end, and sometimes, there are professional writers that stumble into good stories and good screenplays and win Oscars because they stumbled their way through and it turned out to be resonative, but they don't know how to replicate it. And if you don't know how to replicate it, you don't actually have the skill. You just made something one time. And that's what I've always been focused on doing, is that so many writers want to just feel it through, and sometimes when they just feel it through, they hit the target. But I hate writing like that, because it means that I'm writing blind. And sometimes I'll get what I'm looking for, and sometimes I'll just write and write and write, and I'll have no idea how to fix it, no idea how to make it better, and hoping that I can just find it along the way. I don't want to write like that. And luckily, I feel like I don't have to, because I've spent the time to start really figuring out what sets my story up for success when I'm starting out. How do I put this ship on the right track from the beginning, and then from there, I can fix smaller problems, and I can focus on those, which cuts down on rewriting, and it cuts down on just pain and so many things. And so, look, if you are struggling through your first draft of your first screenplay and you're wondering why it's so difficult, it's because you've never done this before, right? Like, think about how many times, you've driven a car. You can get into one and drive it and not think about it. I mean, people text and drink a milkshake and talk to their friends and mess with the radio all while driving. They shouldn't, but they do, and we're able to function. Why? Because it's so ingrained. It's so instinctive. We're not thinking about it anymore because we can just do it. And now, if you had never ever driven, and I put you behind the wheel of a car right now, and I say, okay, here we go. You're going to street race. Let's go. Chances are you probably don't do very well, I would say. If you get off the starting line, then you have a litany of problems ahead of you, right? So what's happening is you're looking at Oscar-winning writers and saying, I need to write like them, and you're 30 pages into your first draft and wondering why it's taking you so long to get off the start line. Because you're doing something that takes time and effort and skill, and the first few scripts are not going to be super duper fun to finish. So just keep pushing through them, right? They're not going to be perfect. Let's not take 3 years to write them. Get it out. Let it be bad. Just give yourself permission, Give yourself permission to write poorly. That is so huge. It's something I talk about in my course. Give yourself permission. Just say, you know what? I'm not perfect. I'm not a perfect writer. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to get something out and I'm going to be proud of progress, not perfection. It's not going to be perfect. I'm going to be proud that today I am a more advanced, more skilled writer than I was yesterday. I know more about myself. I know more about script format. I know more about getting pages out than I did yesterday. And if you keep doing that, suddenly you'll realize you're starting to learn. You're starting to identify problems. So, the time spent, back to that Naval quote, the time spent has nothing to do with job done, right? If it takes you 3 years to write that first draft of your first screenplay, you are wasting your time. Look, I know that's hard to hear if that's you. There's people I've spoken to that have taken that long. You're wasting your time. Because it's not going to be what you want it to be. You have to have fun with it and enjoy getting used to the process right now. And if you can't have fun with it, just say, I believe that writing is valuable and I have something to say and I want to be a writer because blank. You need to know why you want to write, of course, because if you can't, you're not going to get anywhere and there's nothing I can do to help you. But if you're like, I want to be a writer and here's why, great. Get your script done. Make it the worst script you've ever written. It probably will be. If it's your first one, just do it. And if you're in the course, hop on the Sunday Zoom calls, and I can tell this to your face. More nicely, of course. It's easier to, be intense when it's just me sitting here alone in a room. But, I hope this is helpful to you because I want you to know that it does get better. Like, I feel, this past year or so, I've almost had a feeling reinvigorated about writing because it's like, man, with my own writing, like things are really seeming to make sense. And not that it's perfect. It's not. And not that I'm saying I'm a great writer. I still have a long way to go. But things are flowing better. I can fix problems faster than I ever have before. And I want you to come there with me. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to listen to episode 66, you can find it on the Patreon with all the other even episodes. There are I'd I guess, 33 episodes on the Patreon now. So check it out, and I'll see you guys next week.